He was just 3 years old. One moment he was hiking along a Colorado forest trail with a church group. The next he was gone. No crying, no signs of struggle, just vanished. What happened that day has haunted everyone involved. And the deeper you look, the stranger it gets. This is not a case of someone simply wandering off. This is the story of Jared Adaro. Jared Adaro was just 3 years old. He had curious eyes and a playful energy that lit up every space. Always smiling, always exploring, he was a bright, adventurous child with a deep connection to his family. His bond with his father Alan and his older sister Jocelyn was strong. Their small family shared a quiet, meaningful life. Alan Adaro, who was committed to raising his children on his own. He had a lifelong love for the outdoors and worked as a youth mentor guiding others through nature-based experiences. His beliefs also led him to join the Christian Singles Network, a local group. The group provided support and community for people like Alan, who was a single parent after separating from Jared's mother, Stacy McKissick. The group often helped Alan with parenting duties and included his family in social events and outings. Through this connection, the Adaro family became closely involved in the group's activities. Seeking a slower, more intentional way of living, Alan left the fast pace of the city. He moved his family to Poudre Canyon in Colorado, tucked inside the Roosevelt National Forest. There, he and his twin brother Arlene ran a small mountain resort. It offered a peaceful rhythm of life surrounded by rugged landscapes and quiet trails. This natural world became home for Jared and Jocelyn. Jared thrived in that environment. He had a fearless curiosity, always eager to run ahead on the paths, call out animal names, and spot birds in the trees. Nature wasn't just a backdrop, it was his playground. That fearless spirit, so full of wonder, was everything Alan had hoped to nurture in his son. But what brought Jared joy in those wide-open spaces would soon become a painful part of their story. In the crisp October of 1999, a small group from the Christian Singles Network had gathered near the Adaro family's mountain resort. At this point, the group was more than just friends. They now shared a bond of faith and enjoyed spending time outdoors together. Over time, they have become close with the Adaro family, especially with Alan Adaro, Jared's father. Because of that trust, Alan agreed to let his 2 children, Jared and his older sister Jocelyn, join the group on a planned outing to a nearby state fish hatchery. The idea was simple and straightforward. The kids would have a safe, supervised trip where they could learn about trout, nature, and the outdoors. On the morning of the 2nd of October, the group gathered excitedly with the children eager for the day's adventure. Everyone expected a peaceful day, walking together to the hatchery, a well-known local spot perfect for families and children. But as they made their way, the adults suddenly decided to change the plan. Without informing Alan or seeking his approval, they chose to take a detour, a hike along the Big South Trail. This decision surprised many as the Big South Trail was not your typical family stroll. It was a scenic route that followed the winding Cashlock Poudre River, celebrated for its breathtaking views and quiet beauty. The late autumn sunlight filtered through tall pines and aspens, casting golden hues across the forest floor. However, beneath this tranquil surface, the trail was deceptive and challenging. It was narrow and uneven with rocky sections. Steep drop-offs bordered parts of the path and dense wilderness surrounded the hikers, creating a sense of isolation. Cell phone reception was scarce, making any call for help difficult in an emergency. Despite these risks, the group pressed on, bringing the children along. Jared, then just 3 years old, was the youngest in the party. His small size and youthful energy stood out among the group. The adults did not take extra precautions to keep him close. No one held his hand or watched him carefully as the trail twisted through the woods. As the hike continued, the group began to spread out, some moving quickly while others lagged behind. Jared was naturally curious and full of life. He walked with eagerness, often moving ahead of the adults. His bright eyes took in every detail of the forest, from the rustling leaves to the shimmering river below. Witnesses would later describe him as happy and unafraid, exploring with a boundless enthusiasm of a child his age. At one point along the trail, 2 fishermen were casting their lines near a bend by the river. It was here that they spotted a small boy walking alone. He wore a white t-shirt emblazoned with the word Walmart and simple blue jeans. The boy walked calmly without hesitation or signs of distress. The fishermen paid little attention to him, assuming he was part of the larger group they had seen nearby. They did not know he was alone or that this would be the last confirmed sighting of Jared Adida. Just moments later, a scream shattered the quiet forest air. It was a sharp, piercing sound, high-pitched and sudden, echoing through the trees. The scream startled everyone close enough to hear it, including the fishermen. But it lasted only seconds, and no one could tell where it had come from or what had caused it. There was no follow-up noise, no crying or calls for help. After the scream, silence quickly returned to the trail as if nothing had happened. According to Joseline, the scream had little context, as it sounded both like somebody getting attacked or somebody playing with someone. A playful scream, like someone was going up to tag Jared. The group soon realized something was terribly wrong. Jared was missing. At first, they thought he might have run ahead and simply gotten out of sight for a moment. But as they called his name and searched the area, panic began to set in. There was no sign of the little boy anywhere on the trail or in the surrounding forest. The day had begun with innocent plans for a supervised family outing, but it had taken an unexpected and frightening turn, setting the stage for one of Colorado's most puzzling disappearances. After the piercing scream echoed through the forest, the group immediately began searching for Jared. But in the confusion and shock of the moment, no one called for outside help right away. Instead, the adults fanned out along the trail, their voices strained as they called Jared's name through the dense trees and rocky terrain. The crisp mountain air carried their anxious cries, but the forest gave back only silence. Time passed slowly, the golden afternoon fading into the early shadows of evening. The group's growing desperation was palpable, each minute stretching endlessly as hope began to wane. Yet, despite their efforts, the search remained confined to the immediate area. No one had reached out to the authorities or coordinated a wider search. Meanwhile, back at the Pudra River Resort, Alan Adidarado was unaware of the mounting crisis. Hours slipped by before someone returned, breathless and worried to report that Jared was missing. The weight of the news crushed Alan. His heart sank as he grappled with disbelief and fear, realizing his youngest son had vanished without a trace on a trail he had never approved. Alan broke down mentally, getting into his vehicle while beating his own chest and screaming repeatedly, "They lost my baby. They lost my baby." With the sun dipping below the mountain peaks, emergency responders sprang into action. Local law enforcement immediately joined forces with the Lama County search and rescue teams. Word spread quickly, and before long, federal agencies were involved, bringing specialized resources to the search effort. Bill Nelson, now a recently retired undersheriff with the Lerma County Sheriff's Office, was in charge of the search for Jared. "Absolutely. I thought we would find him," he said. "Yes, it was a young child, but my thought was, we should be able to get in there with our people and do what we do, and what we have done hundreds of times. Find the person. It might take a few hours to find the child crying or hiding someplace nearby, but we would be done before midnight." Nelson went to his vehicle for a quick nap just before midnight and told his staff to wake him when they found the boy. When he awoke the next morning in the front seat of his pickup truck, he became concerned, realizing that Jared still had not been located. An extensive search for Jared Adida started, but the search itself was hindered by multiple difficulties. What was supposed to be a coordinated rescue mission quickly spiraled into something else entirely. It wasn't just a missing person case anymore. It was confusion, chaos, and catastrophe both on the ground and in the air as law enforcement, volunteers, and military personnel scoured the steep and unforgiving terrain of the Big South Trail in Colorado's Roosevelt National Forest. They faced a situation as treacherous as it was emotionally overwhelming. Time was slipping away. The trail was growing colder, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. Then disaster struck. During the aerial portion of the search, a Huey 1-inch helicopter from F.E. Warren Air Force Base in Cheyenne, Wyoming, one of the military's trusted aircraft, was dispatched to assist in the rugged mountain terrain. It first flew to the Fort Collins Loveland Municipal Airport to refuel, then re-entered the mountain corridor to assist search teams from above. On board were 4 military crew members and Mark Sheets, a member of Lama County Search and Rescue. Sheets wasn't even supposed to be on that flight. He had relieved his colleague George Jansen from duty and was encouraged to join the crew to help coordinate a ground search strategy. Sheets wanted to help. He wanted to make a difference. But within minutes of returning to the rugged, high-altitude forest, the helicopter began struggling. The weight of the fuel load combined with the thin mountain air created a perfect storm. The aircraft stalled. Sheets, remember the moment clearly. He was lying on the floor of the chopper with the door open when he made a chilling statement over the intercom. "We need altitude now." The co-pilot's response was haunting. "I know, but I can't. We're going in." It was the kind of moment where time slows down. You realize you're no longer in control, and something terrible is about to happen. The rotors clipped treetops. The blade shattered. Debris flew like shrapnel into the woods. As Sheets tried to pull the door closed, a large severed tree limb pierced through the open hatch, smashing into the Air Force doctor's face, fracturing his eye socket. Moments later, impact. The helicopter slammed into the forest, disintegrating as it struck the ground. It broke apart into 3 separate pieces, and yet the twin jet engines kept screaming, still functioning, as fuel continued to burn inside. The noise echoed for hours until the tanks finally ran dry. The military crew, though shaken and injured, managed to crawl from the wreckage. But Sheets was not so lucky. He had been thrown and pinned unconscious with severe injuries. A 13-inch gash down his leg left his femur bone visible. He suffered a severe concussion, 3 fractured vertebrae, and a broken shoulder. He would later say that he only got on that flight to try to help find Jared to do something useful. Instead, he nearly lost his life. Nearby search and rescue members sprinted toward the crash site. They found a helicopter in ruins, parts scattered across the forest floor. When they reached the wreckage, they kicked in a window to pull Sheets out, saving his life. But emotionally, Sheets was wrecked. The search for a missing child had now led to a military accident and nearly claimed more lives. And this was only the beginning of the chaos. Back on the ground, things weren't faring any better. With a helicopter crash drawing attention, the media swarmed the area like a second storm. According to Lamar County Sheriff Justin Smith, who was a sergeant at the time, the situation exploded almost overnight. "We had searchers down who they were bringing out on stretchers. We had a missing kid overnight. We had the Air Force closing off the crash site." And then he said, television satellite trucks, 17 at one time, lined up along Highway 14. Anchors and fur coats were walking around the trail. The disappearance of Jared was no longer just a local tragedy. It had become a national media event. With all the pressure, confusion, and spectacle that brings, it was now being compared to another Colorado case that had gripped the nation. The unsolved murder of John Bain Ramsey. What came next blurred the line between search and circus. Psychics called in tips, offering supernatural insights into Jared's whereabouts. A barefoot man arrived with a donkey, insisting he could track the boy. A Native American spiritualist conducted rituals, asking the mountain itself to give up the child. The situation became surreal, and all the while, volunteers and professional teams continued to search riverbanks, climb steep hillsides, and dive into cold mountain pools. Planes flew overhead. Every inch of terrain was combed, but still nothing. And in the middle of it all, Alan Adidorado, Jared's father, was watching the entire scene collapse into confusion. His son was gone, and now the world was watching, but not necessarily helping. In a later interview, Alan admitted it became a tornado, a hurricane, the biggest storm in all our lives. He had placed his trust in the professionals, but the whirlwind of media accidents and strange distractions had consumed the search. "I was critical of them at the time," Alan said. "When you're in a survival situation, you want everything that can be done to be done, and at times I thought there was so much more they could have done." Amidst this storm, Alan Adidorado found himself under intense public scrutiny. Instead of receiving sympathy and support, he was subjected to suspicion and blame. Strangers sent harsh letters and emails, accusing the family of neglect, or worse. Some went as far as to suggest spiritual causes or curses had led to Jared's disappearance. Others whispered bizarre stories, sometimes invoking local folklore or religious rhetoric. Despite the setbacks, hope remained alive for many. Though clouded by the swirling controversies and emotional strain, the mission to bring Jared home was no longer just about finding one boy. It had become a complex, tangled story where fear, suspicion, and human emotion battled the unforgiving wilderness. After the frantic chaos of the initial search, The world slowly began to move on, but Alan Adado refused to let go. For him, the search was far from over. It had become a lifelong mission. Every day since Jared's disappearance, Alan pushed forward with relentless determination, holding on to the hope that his son was still out there waiting to be found. He plastered every available surface with missing posters, store windows, telephone poles, community centers, even gas stations far beyond Colorado. Each poster bore Jared's smiling face and a plea for any information. He handed them out personally whenever he could, his voice steady but hearty, asking strangers if they had seen anything at all. Interviews followed. Local news stations welcomed him back repeatedly, and sometimes national programs spotlighted the case. Alan spoke openly about his love for Jared, the pain of not knowing, and his refusal to give up. These moments were difficult but necessary, a way to keep the story alive and reach someone who might hold a missing piece of the puzzle. Behind the scenes, the sleepless nights took their toll. Alan spent countless hours combing through old reports, searching public records, and following up on every lead. No matter how small or unlikely, he kept contact with law enforcement, volunteer groups, and even psychics, anyone who claimed to have insight. Every call raised his hopes and dashed them just as quickly. But as months turned to years, the trail grew colder. No credible tips came through, no new sightings, and no physical evidence. The once vibrant search effort dwindled to occasional check-ins and quiet prayers. The pain of not knowing settled in a constant ache under the surface of daily life. The media interest faded. The headlines stopped running. New stories replaced the missing boy's face in newspapers and on television screens. To the public, the case was nearly forgotten. Just another unresolved mystery lost in time. Yet in the quiet shadows, something lingered. An unspoken presence that refused to fade. For Alan, and those who never gave up, the disappearance of Jared was not a closed chapter, but a wound left open, waiting for answers. Somewhere beyond the years of silence, hope quietly persisted. In 2003, businessmen Rob Osborne and Gareth Watts were hiking together in the Poudre Canyon area near the Big South Trail. The dense canopy filtered the sunlight, casting eerie patterns on the forest floor. As the hikers rounded a bend near a narrow ravine, something unusual caught their eyes, a flash of color among the brown leaves and moss. Approaching cautiously, they came across partial human remains, including a cluster of clothing arranged almost unnaturally near the edge of a rocky outcrop. There lay a brown polar fleece sweater, a pair of blue trousers, and the Disney's Tarzan sneakers that Jared had been wearing when he disappeared. Forensic teams soon arrived and carefully collected the remains, treating the site with the utmost respect and precision. Further searching revealed a human molar and a large piece of fractured human skull. DNA testing at the time revealed that the remains were 86% likely to be Jared's. More modern DNA testing revealed that the remains were 100% Jared's, rather than bury or cremate the remains. Alan Adado decided to keep them, creating a shrine to Jared out of his old bedroom, kept exactly as it was before he disappeared, with the skull piece kept atop Jared's favorite toys and belongings. According to Alan, I am at peace, and I know I'm going to see Jared again one of these days. I'm going to look at him and say, Jared, what happened? He's going to look at me and say, Dad, does it really matter? The identification of Jared Adado's remains in 2003 should have brought closure, but instead it opened a floodgate of questions no one could answer. Initially, investigators leaned toward a familiar explanation, a mountain lion attack. It was a theory that made surface-level sense. The Colorado wilderness is home to cougars, and small children are tragically vulnerable in such environments. Officials suggested Jared might have wandered too far and fallen prey to one of these powerful predators, but the theory unraveled quickly under closer examination. Wildlife experts and forensic analysts began raising red flags. The condition of Jared's clothing didn't fit the typical patterns of an animal attack. His sweater, pants, and sneakers showed no claw marks, tearing, or bloodstains, details that would be expected if a cougar had struck. The clothing was strangely pristine, and in some cases, eerily preserved, even more puzzling. The remains hadn't been scattered. A mountain lion would typically drag a kill to a secluded area and tear it apart over time. Bones would likely be found far from each other, damaged or not. but Jared's bones were found near his clothes in a relatively concentrated area with no indication of predation. The scene didn't suggest a struggle, it suggested stillness. Then came the question of the pants. Why were they inside out? Forensic anthropologists found that detail unsettling. While children sometimes undress themselves in confusion or fear, it's rare. And given the terrain and Jared's age, it's hard to imagine him taking his pants off at all, let alone turning them inside out in the process. Another chilling inconsistency was the location of the discovery itself. The site where the clothes and bones were found lay hundreds of feet above the trail, nearly 500 vertical feet over steep, rocky terrain. It was a brutal climb even for seasoned hikers. Jared was 3 years old, barely over 50 pounds, and wearing tennis shoes. No one could explain how he would have reached that height on his own, let alone survived long enough to get there without anyone seeing or hearing him. That geographic puzzle stirred more than just curiosity. It triggered suspicion. Some began to wonder if Jared had ever been there at all. At least not until later. Could it be that someone moved his remains? That the discovery site wasn't the original scene, but a carefully chosen location meant to confuse or mislead. The theory of abduction, once considered unlikely, re-entered the conversation. Perhaps Jared had been taken that day, and for reasons unknown, his remains were returned or planted years later. As speculation grew, darker theories emerged. Some whispered of cover-ups of key details being buried or overlooked. Others speculated about sinister forces, both human and otherwise. From conspiracies involving wilderness crimes to supernatural or ritualistic explanations, the absence of a clear narrative left a vacuum that the public and the media rushed to fill. Yet, despite all the theories, nothing fit cleanly. No single explanation accounted for all the evidence. The pristine clothes, the cluster remains, the impossible climb, the lack of trauma, the years of silence. What happened to Jared Adedorado remains one of the most unsettling mysteries in modern wilderness cases. Not just because he vanished, but because the answers, when they finally came, made even less sense than the disappearance itself. To this day, those who work the case are divided. Former law enforcement officers, wilderness trackers, and even family members continue to debate what happened. One retired search coordinator put it plainly, "This case doesn't have closure because it doesn't make sense. Every theory breaks down at some point. That's the problem." Another noted, "I've seen mountain lion attacks. This wasn't one, but I've also worked abduction cases, and this wasn't typical either." For Alan Adedero, the father who has spent decades looking for truth, none of the theories matter more than the final reality. His son is gone, and despite the recovery of his remains, the real story of what happened that day in the Colorado wilderness may never be fully known. From the very beginning, Alan's mission was clear. He wouldn't let his son be reduced to a cold case file or a faded photograph. Jared mattered. His story mattered. And Alan was going to make sure the world remembered, even in his absence. But Alan didn't stop there. He poured his pain in a purpose. He wrote a book detailing every moment of Jared's story. From the innocent hike that turned tragic to the long nights of searching to the endless battle for answers. In its pages, he didn't just recount what happened. He exposed the failures, the flaws, and the unanswered questions surrounding his son's disappearance. He became an advocate, not just for Jared, but for every parent who's ever been left behind in the shadows of a vanished child. He called for better safety protocols in national parks, clearer communication in emergency responses, and more accountability from those in charge of search efforts. He made appearances, he gave interviews. He stood in front of microphones, cameras, and strangers, reliving his deepest pain because he believed it could prevent another family from enduring the same heartbreak. For Alan, advocacy wasn't about heroism, it was about love. The fierce, undying love of a father who refused to give up. A father who looked into the void and decided to speak even when it hurt. He meant resistance. Not everyone wanted to reopen old wounds. Some people wished he'd move on, accept the official story, and let it go. But Alan couldn't. Not when so many questions remained. Not when the answers didn't line up. Not when his gut, his heart, and the evidence all whispered the same haunting truth. There's more to this story. In the years that followed, Alan connected with other families who had lost children in mysterious ways, some in national parks, others in small towns or dense forests. Together, they formed a silent network of pain and perseverance. Their stories were different, but their heartbreak was the same. Today, Alan Adado is not just a grieving father. He's a symbol of strength, a man who refused to fade, a voice that still echoes in the halls of justice and in the hearts of those who listen. He once said, "I don't want people to feel sorry for me. I want them to remember Jared. I want them to ask questions. I want them to care." And because of him, many do. Jared Adedero may be gone, but thanks to his father's relentless fight, his story lives on, not just as a mystery, but as a call to never stop seeking the truth. Alan Adaro was once harassed by a man claiming to be Jared himself, and Alan took out a restraining order on this individual. When the restraining order was violated, the man was arrested. The discovery of Jared's remains and the DNA match invalidated the man's claims, and it is believed by authorities that the man was mentally ill or trying to seek attention of some sort. As of today, the case remains officially unsolved. 2 books have been published surrounding the Jared Adida case. Missing: The Jared Adida Story. A father turns tragedy into hope after the 1999 disappearance of his son in the Colorado mountains, and also Missing: When the Sun Sets. The Jared Aduro Story. Jared Aduro's death prompted Governor Bill Ritter of Colorado to declare the 8th of September as Recreational Safety Awareness Week in honor of Jared Adaro. Alan Adado was given the opportunity to give the proclamation from Governor Ritter to Assistant Principal Lori Perry Crumbin of Falcon Bluffs Middle School, where Alan also worked as a teacher. Ending on this note, the constant question remains: what really happened on that trail in the Colorado wilderness? Why would a healthy, happy child vanish within minutes without a trace? And how could the forest remain silent for 4 long years, only to return his remains in such a baffling state? Was it nature, a tragic accident missed by searchers? Was it something darker, something that evades logical explanation? Some mysteries leave behind more questions than answers. This is one of them. We may never fully understand how Jared disappeared. We may never know what he endured or if he was alone during those missing years. But one thing is certain: someone somewhere knows more than we do. As investigators filed away reports and headlines faded, a father kept the flame alive, not for closure, but for clarity. He reminded us that not every mystery ends with resolution, and not every truth gets uncovered. The Colorado mountains gave back Jared's remains, but not his story that's still hidden among the trees. If this case struck you as deeply as it did us, help keep Jared's story alive. Like, share, and subscribe for more true crime mysteries that demand answers, and tell us in the comments, what do you believe really happened in the Colorado wilderness that day? Your voice might be the one that helped shed new light on a cold trail.